So welcome and thank you for coming to the Sunnybrook School roundtable. I'm going to introduce the people who are here with us. We actually have our principal, Tara-Lee Brunn, who is joining us.
Welcome.
We have myself, I'm Tanya Lowe, the Vice Principal and Director of Admissions. So hello, if you're looking for the admissions thing, you'll be dealing with me going forward. We have Michael Rossiter, who is Vice Principal, our IB Coordinator and Grade 6 teacher. Many hats.
Everyone.
We have an alumni parent, Lori Levitt, with us today.
Hello.
So she had 2 children that have graduated from Sunnybrook. So we're very happy to have her come back and share her experience with you. We also have Linda Ezergalis, who has 1 alumni daughter and 1 daughter still in grade 6 at Sunnybrook. So she has 2 hats that she's wearing. So hello, Linda.
Hello.
And we have finally Heather Morrison, who is actually our Parent Association president, and she has a son in grade 1.
Hi, everyone.
All right, so thank you for joining us. During the initial presentation, I'm going to be fielding questions to each of our 3 parent panelists, and they'll be answering that. If you have questions that you think of as you come during that time, you can type them into the chat, and Mr. Rosser is going to help field those at the end. I think it is going to be quite an intimate group, so that's kind of nice because at the end we will open it up for a few questions at the end. So if you have something that you would like to specifically ask one of the panelists, you are welcome to do that. So you can either put it in the chat or save it for later. We are going to start with the alumni questions, and then I'll work down into the kind of the current parent questions, and each panelist will have an opportunity to speak to the question. And again, panelists, if you have something to add after somebody else has spoken, feel free to add in your comments and thoughts if you have something else that you think comes up. So we are going to get started. I'm going to ask the first question to our alumni, Lori Levitt. So the first question is, what did you appreciate most about the school during your time there? And how has your perspective on that changed now that you have some distance from the school?
I actually had trouble with this question because my perspective hasn't changed a lot. I still feel the same way about the school as when I left. And the only thing that I could come up with would be that the budgeting, and it didn't occur to me, I guess I was naive, that Sunnybrook is kind of, you pay the tuition, you know, you pay for if there's an overnight trip or something like that, but really that's what you pay. You know, unless there's some extras or a little bit of, you know, tiny fundraising here and there with purchasing things. But again, that's not expected. But I found that now my son is in another school. I don't know, are we allowed to say the school names or not say the school names? What's the rule here?
I don't think so.
Okay, I don't know. So my son, he graduated grade 6. I should say that my son and my daughter both went from junior kindergarten to grade 6 at Sunnybrook. So my son has now gone on to his next school, and he's in grade 8 right now, and at a larger school. And so the one thing I've noticed is that we get billed monthly for all the extras, and the extras shockingly add up. You know, at Sunnybrook, they give the kids each a house t-shirt when they start the school. You don't see a bill for that later on down the road, unless you need another size 3 years later or something. They give the kids a house t-shirt at his current school, and there's a $28 bill for a charge for us on our bill. The lunches, having the lunches at Sunnybrook was huge. You know, knowing my kids, and it kind of, they were a bit picky, a little bit of picky eating happened, but we just kind of like went with the flow, and they learned to try new things, etc. So it really worked well for us, the lunches. They had their favorites and their not favorites, but that's okay. That's dinner time too. But I would say that all the extras I get on that bill every month, and the lunches can easily add up. They're about depends on the lower, depends on how the lower grades and upper grades, but they easily range around $200 a month just for lunch. So the budgeting, which I didn't really, I took for granted, I think, at Sunnybrook, which is a huge plus when you're budgeting those things.
Great, thank you, Lori.
That's it for that.
Very interesting, thank you. All right, Lori's next question, we're going to stick with our alumni here. What, to the best of your knowledge, most differentiates Sunnybrook School from others?
I think the size, the fact that it's a very small, tight-knit school, and that it's co-ed, and that it's IB. I think those three things. I don't know another small school that's IB and co-ed. So maybe there's one out there, I don't know. But I think that really sets it apart. The IB is a great education, but to do it in a small, caring environment, where the teachers all know the students, etc., and the kids all know the kids as well. The small size worked for us in the younger grades. Just the fact that my little SK could walk down the hall and an older child would know his name. That in itself is huge. At a larger school, that just doesn't happen. Even when they get the little kids together with the bigger kids, they don't see them anywhere near as much. They don't work with them during the musicals and things like that. So I think the size, and on the flip side, the size also, I have two very different kids. My daughter, the small size, we had no concerns about it. We thought she'd be fine there. She'd be happy there. Really brought her out of her shell a lot. She was a very shy, quiet kid. Where my son is anything but quiet. He's loud, he's boisterous. He walks in the room, everyone knows he's there. He plays like baseball, rugby, and football. And we thought, ooh, is this gonna have what he needs? And they absolutely had what he needs as well. So I think the fact that they can cater to different types of children as well. It's not like you're this kind of kid, so you fit here. So yeah.
Great, Lori, thank you. So the next question is going to be asked to Lori, and this question actually is going to be asked to Heather later when we get to our current parents. So it'll be interesting to see their responses. But the question is, if the school were to be represented as a single person, what would its personality be like in only 3 words?
I'm using a compound word, so I'm going to cheat. I would say open-minded, vibrant, and caring. Should I expand on those things?
Speak to that for a minute. Yeah.
Open-mindedness, because, the school I found very open to suggestions from both children and parents. They like a lot of feedback, getting ideas, and constantly growing, not sort of sitting in one place and not changing. I saw a lot of growth throughout the years because my kids are also 5 years apart, so 6th grade years apart, actually. So I saw a lot of growth in the school, and I think that was because they were very open-minded, always looking to try new things and taking suggestions and taking feedback. And I appreciated that about the school. And I think the small size also speaks to that they're able to do that. Let me see, what was also say? Vibrant. I always felt like there was an energy or a buzz going on in the school, just with like the concerts and the school musical, and which every kid is involved in, and just the different activities. There was always something. There was always excitement and a buzz in the school, and I think it would be a very exciting place to work, let alone to go to school there as a kid, because I saw it when I would walk in. And I really enjoyed that about the school. I felt that it had that extra buzz, I guess. And the nurturing or caring, once again, I a little bit touched on this, but I really felt that these teachers cared about the individual student. When your child changed grades, for instance, the next teacher was well-versed in what that student was like, both academically, emotionally, etc. I believe they had meetings, I think, if I recall, but they also, it's because it's so small, they meet all the teachers before, they know who their next teacher is going to be. They have that small environment. So, that I felt that the teachers really did care. Teachers would ask as they went on to the next grade, how's your kid doing? That sort of thing, which I thought was fabulous. And also the kids are caring. The kids, the whole environment is just a very caring, nurturing space. I wish, it's so hard during the pandemic to choose a school. I feel bad because I felt that we knew it was the right school. Sunnybrook was the right school. It wasn't on paper. It was the feeling we got when we went into the school, and just like looking at the little kindergartners, and we thought, yeah, look at how it's just lovely. Like I can't. It's very hard. It's one of those things. We walked in, and after about 10 minutes, we were like, this is the school. We just knew it, and it was that environment. So yeah.
Thank you, Lori. That's wonderful. All right, the last question for Lori is, what one thing would you change about the school for the better if you had to choose something?
Again, a really hard question. The only thing I could come up with really is that I really wish that the school had gone on longer. I felt that, especially for my daughter, space is what it is and you can't, but she could have used an extra couple years in a small environment probably. But going on, and both my daughter and son went to single-sex larger schools. And both of them, in my daughter's school, because my daughter's now in second year university, so I have more experience with her going all the way through. And I learned that there's a term called lifers at the big school. And in so much so that they actually celebrate this at the school at graduation, and they get like kind of an award for going from kindergarten to grade 12. However, it's almost like they made it, because a lot of the kids didn't end up going all the way through. They would start early, and the same environment, the same thing. They almost burned out. A lot of my daughter's friends, just after about grade 9, were like just ready to move on because they couldn't. So I was glad that we'd started our children at a different school, because I knew where I wanted them to graduate from. So in only putting them in for a certain amount of time in the big school, they're likely to stay till the end. And this was something I didn't know beforehand. So I guess it could have been question 1 too. But it was a surprising consequence of a surprising consequence of her moving on to a big school. And knowing that some parents might start their kids in the big school thinking, oh, it's easy because then they just stay through. A lot of the kids kind of burn out of that part. But anyway,
Yeah, that's very insightful.
If I can add to that, even though it's not my question, I have heard that some families at the big schools will deliberately transition even to another big school, whether it's middle school or high school, just to give their children that option for change prior to going to university, so they understand what it's like to adjust to a new environment. And I didn't appreciate that fully, but now that I see my older daughter having made that transition, I think it was a real learning experience for her, and certainly something I think that I didn't initially value.
That's a good point. Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you so much. These are wonderful answers. Okay, actually, I'm going to go to you, Linda, now. So the first 2 questions for Linda is, she's actually going to be wearing her alumni hat still, and then we'll transition to current parent questions. But her first question is, what would families find most surprising about Sunnybrook?
I think the deep friendships that our children developed, even with kids who joined after JK. So I had one child who joined in JK and the other one joined in grade 1. So they joined at the same time. So even the grade 1 rookie, she developed very deep friendships. But I think also how well I've gotten to know some of the families, not just parents of my children's closer friends, but also the ones that we've been seeing and socializing with at school events over the years. And I'm not, I'm a very busy working mom, so it's not like I had the opportunity to spend a lot of time on campus, to spend a lot of time volunteering. But still, when I do go on campus, I'm welcomed. There's not an expectation that I'm there a lot. And so it's just been when I do get the chance to go, I'm surprised at how welcome I feel and how I feel like I fit in, even though I'm a little bit more of a visitor. I think also, and Lori touched on this as well, I was surprised about how well all the teachers got to know my children and adjust their approach to developing each child. I think the school is well known for its strong academics, but there was also a very big emphasis on social integration and understanding the children's different personalities and learning styles. So even though I walked in knowing that the academics were strong based on its reputation, I ended up appreciating very much more after we joined how well the whole child is developed in a number of ways. So, beyond social learning styles, there was also community engagement, leadership, and the teachers really seem to take a real interest in my daughter's well-being. And I really appreciated that. And again, I probably should have been more aware of that when the children were young, but as they get older, you start to understand how important these sometimes less discussed things are.
Great, thank you, Linda. All right, the next question for you, as still an alumni, is what advice would you give to students just entering Sunnybrook?
Sure. So daughters are maybe a little bit more introverted. One of the things that I would encourage students to do, which they've learned to do, is don't hesitate to ask the teachers questions about anything, whether it's homework, how to navigate friendships over the years, if there's issues with lunch, what a certain extracurricular commitment might entail, including bigger roles in the school musical and how much time they need to spend on that. The list goes on, and it would differ across children, their age, and I just think back to all of those questions that sometimes in the initial years we didn't really want to bother the teachers, but over the years we got more comfortable in helping them navigate all of this and what worked best for our child. I think another thing that I would recommend to kids is, in the younger years, a lot of children will invite the whole class to the birthday parties because it is a smaller class. And I would encourage any students to encourage their parents to prioritize these parties and these get-togethers outside the school and the household schedule. In retrospect, I made more of an effort with the older kid to make room on weekends for these events. And on the margin, I think we got to know more of the parents a little bit better in that class than for our younger child. So that's one thing I would have done differently. And I kind of already touched on that I'm a busy working mom, but one of the things I would encourage students to do and parents is make sure your parents are aware of the smaller events and how much fun they are, not just the bigger events. It was a real effort to carve out time in my work schedule to get to things like the annual class French small musical, for example, where just the parents of the year putting it on were invited inside the school. And I didn't get to all of them by any stretch. When sometimes I'd get to see the video replays, and because they were often during the day, I wasn't the only parent that couldn't make it, but they were intimate and so cute, and you definitely got a sense of all the personalities in the class. Unlike the big musicals where not everyone could take a leading role, and that was in the evening, and it was just a different feel. So that was one of the many opportunities that my kids got to present or perform in front of a larger audience, just beyond students and teachers that they knew. And while they understood I couldn't make it, especially when I was traveling for work, I really got a sense that it was special that they could share those moments with me when I could be there. So that's something that I would really, strongly advocate for people that can carve out those moments. It's worth it.
Thank you. Thank you. That's great. Okay, I'm going to switch hats here, Linda. So as a current parent, the question is, what is the biggest impact that the school has had on your children?
Well, I think both of them are very curious, and it's hard to know what was nature versus what was nurture, because the inquiry-based learning that the IB structure has, I'm assuming, probably helped foster that in the children. And and then again, my husband and I were both engineers by trade originally, so I guess maybe we just have those analytical discussions as well that I don't even pick up on. But it's really fun to discuss, why, for example, if a freezer would have, uh, bottom opening door or top opening doors versus side, and what the pros and the cons and the manufacturing and the use and all that kind of stuff are. So those types of random everyday discussions, I think, maybe they would have been happening, but I think they're happening more because of the IB. Also, being a little bit of a risk taker. And again, that's kind of an IB attribute that, especially my older daughter, she's not that adventurous. So she was exposed to a lot of things she wouldn't normally be exposed to. For example, she wanted to skip the ski trip in grade 1. It's just a day trip for phys ed. We said, no, it's part of the curriculum. You have to go. She loved it so much that we ended up giving her skiing lessons the next year, which we wouldn't have planned to do because we're not a skiing family. And now she's ready to be an instructor, to train to be an instructor. She's been told for 2 years now, and she's only in grade 8. So that's an example of something that she was exposed to that we didn't, again, appreciate how much it would be such an important part of her life. The other thing is that both children have developed some really strong friendships. And they also were able to embrace the growing leadership opportunities that they were given as they progressed into the older grades. In grade 6, the students can be a house leader for the school-wide houses, and that compete against each other through the year. It's a bit different for my younger daughter through this pandemic year, but those are things that I think that were really transformative for them.
Thank you. All right, Linda, your last question is, how would you describe the values of the school and the values of the families in the school community?
Well, I think the school does a very good job of fostering community, and I think that's very important. And I think it manifests itself also in the types of families that are attracted to the school, because it's a really positive part of the whole experience for the children. And Lori touched on also, I think that respect for an individual is very important. The IB allows for differentiated learning based on what your child's interests and abilities are within a broader group. So I think that's important. And over the years, even I have, even though I'm not a professional educator, come to appreciate the IB learner profile. My daughters get pins and they get leaves and they get rewarded for demonstrating the attributes, whether it be inquirer, being knowledgeable, a thinker, communicator, principled, open-minded, caring. I touched on risk taker, balanced, and reflective. So they're naturally stronger in some areas. They're encouraged to develop the areas that don't come quite as naturally for them. But I think that provides a real framework that some of the adults I've encountered in life probably could have benefited from, including myself. But I think at the end of the day, just the IB profile does prepare them to be a global citizen as well. The curriculum as well prepares them for whatever they'll face in life whenever, including, pandemics, etc. They're pretty resilient.
Thank you, Linda. I'm very pleased that the learner profile attributes translated so well to you, and you knew them all. That's amazing.
Well, you're teaching the parents as well, right?
That's great. Yeah, no, thank you so much for your thoughtful answers. And now we're going to move on to Heather, who is our current parent of a grade 1 student, just to remind you. And so Heather, your first question is, Why did you choose the school originally? And in what ways is the school what you expected? And in what ways is it not?
So I looked at obviously more than one school for my son. We started Sunnybrook in JK. And what drew me to Sunnybrook was their very small class sizes. In Hunter's first year, I think there was only 15 in his JK class. And what I also liked is there is only one grade per class. So, you know, you get that one class, you get that teacher, and that is your core. That is your friends. That's, you know, your everything, which is wonderful. And you move around and you do all the different activities with your class. I love the fact that it was co-ed. I think that's extremely important, especially in the earlier years, getting them to understand how to make friends with both boys and girls and the differences. Because I went to a private girls' school for my high school years. And I think having that co-ed education in the beginning is very important. The IB drew me a lot to Sunnybrook because I had a why kid. Every 5 seconds, why? So the fact that he can explore and ask the big questions. We were walking one day at the cottage and he loves natural disasters. So like volcanoes and, you know, tsunamis. And he wanted to know about Pompeii. I'm like, how in the world do you know about that? Because of Sunnybrook, because he gets to ask those inquisitive questions. I love the fact that Sunnybrook, not just because it's small, doesn't mean it doesn't offer all the things a bigger school would offer. You've got sports, you've got art, you've got music. They start French in JK. I keep thinking my kid is still in SK. So you get the big school feel in a nice small package. And for some reason, the fact that they still teach cursive writing at Sunnybrook was a big thing for me. And I love that. So I remember graduating to a fountain pen, which nobody uses anymore in grade 4. And it's great that they do teach that art. And also starting French again in JK was very important because I learned in grade 4 and I never carried on, just didn't catch. And it's caught Hunter. And so that's wonderful. To the second part of the question, in what way is it what you expected? It's what I expected because JKSK, the teachers in those foundation years has given the best start to my kid. I don't think you could get a better teacher than Mrs. T for junior kindergarten. And that strong parent teacher communication, I could walk into their classroom every morning for drop off, talk to Mrs. T and Ms. Denning about what was going on with him, what was going on in the class and in school, and you get that nice relationship. And also, I mean, who knew a global pandemic would hit? You guys have done an outstanding job dealing with that, getting things back on track and having all of your protocols. I mean, no one could have expected it, and it's been great. Some things that are not the way I would expected. It's a small school. I would have loved a cafeteria for them to have that, you know, time as a group at mealtime would have been nice, but the fact that, you know, in normal circumstances, they get to be out on the playground together is wonderful. I didn't think I was going to like the iPad program just because they get so much technology outside of school, but I definitely think that it's been beneficial for him in school and it's what they're going to grow up with. It's the world now. Everybody has one in their household or two. And the coding on it is phenomenal. He loves it. He does Osmo at home. And so whether he knows it or not, he's doing work for fun. And I didn't know a lot about the IB program, but I like the learner profile, completely unique. And it's because of it, it's created an enthusiastic, excited learner out of my son. So it's been great.
Thank you, Heather. All right, your next question is, what does your son Hunter have to say about Sunnybrook?
Well, this is coming from a grade 1, so they're not I mean, I've had to like paraphrase because they teach good. They teach good at Sunnybrook. So he said the teachers are good at explaining adding and subtraction. So they're good at, you know, making it sound fun and intriguing and getting the points across. The students that you invite are nice and friendly and easy to make friends with. The school lunches are yummy. And his favorite is meatballs and pasta. Except I don't like it when it gets on his white shirt. And lastly, some of his favorite things to do, he likes to paint and art and do fun activities. So those activities would be the JKSK Play Day. He liked watching the musical When It Was Madagascar in-house and doing the Cherry Fox Run.
That's adorable. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, Heather. And the final question for our panelists is that same question that we asked Lori earlier is, if the school were to be represented as a single person, what would its personality be like in 3 words?
So the 3 words I came up with were independent, curious, and kind. So for independent, Mrs. T and JK said it best: never do something for your child that they can do themselves. So I have never carried my son's backpack to or from school because he's capable, he can do it. Same thing like doing up their jackets, try, and then ask for help. So my son is definitely takes after mommy and he's very independent. Curious, again, with the IB and the inquiry-based learning. And in SK last year, they each got to ask a big question. And then they went into it and found out, like, used different resources to research their question. And then they did it with the teacher. So Hunter's big question was, how do scientists come up with, was it experiments or like with I don't know what was, with something. So they did an actual experiment and the teacher gave each student special time to come up in front of the class and present and have it explained with them, to them. Also being kind, they learn through the IB learning profile to show respect and empathy to others as well as themselves. So it's not only creating, like physical empathy towards other people and their well-being, but it's also emotional too.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Heather, for your thoughtful answers. So at this point, I do just want to say that if you have questions, this is your opportunity to ask these parent panelists. This is not a questions for the people like our principal and Mr. Rossiter. We are going to be having an open house that you're welcome to attend in October on the 21st. You are more than welcome, if you would like more information about the actual school or the admissions, to email me and set up a one-on-one Zoom question. But utilize this opportunity here to be able to ask questions, if you have any, to the actual parents who have experienced Sunnybrook and their children being there. And if you're comfortable putting on your video, if you have a question, then we can see you and be able to field that a little bit better. So I'm gonna take a few minutes and put it out to our guests and ask if anyone has a question they would like to ask a particular panelist. And if you can unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm Jen. My 2 sons would be going into, I guess, grade 1 and grade 4. So I'm just wondering if anybody has experience of a student joining a little later on in the grades and how they fit in with the existing students and with the ones that have started in JK.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I can take that one. And then if you want to add to it, Heather. So my daughter joined in grade 1. And there was actually a number of students that joined with her. There were some kids that had already started, obviously, in JK. So I think that was fairly seamless. Both my daughters had cohorts, peers that joined in the later years. And my younger daughter right now, one of her closest friends joined just in grade 5. and they're in grade 6 now. So there still is an opportunity to form those tight friendships. And from an academic perspective, I hear from other parents that I guess one of the areas that tends to lag is French, because as I think Lori mentioned, French starts in JK at Sunnybrook and not in the public school system. So my understanding is they get a lot of support and supplemental resources to kind of ensure that they can be accelerated to quite seamlessly. I don't know if you have a lot to add to that, Heather.
I'm just gonna say, I mean, Hunter's in grade 1 now. They had a couple of kids transition out of Sunnybrook last year, but 5 new kids came this year. And I always ask, you know, make sure, Hunter, are you playing with any of the new kids? Are they getting along? Are they, you know, making friends? And, you know, we had a couple that came to Hunter's birthday party on the weekend, and they seem to be making great friendships.
Yeah, I was going to add that we had a little reunion at my house last November for my sons. They had just graduated in June, and so we had them all over, parents and kids. And I have to say that you almost can't tell which ones have been there. Like it really is seamless. And I think sometimes when a new child comes in, there's a lot of excitement around it. So it's not seen as somebody kind of coming in, because remember, these kids stay in the same grade throughout. So the fact that they have new blood, if I can say it that way, it's exciting. They're excited when a new child comes in. So I think for the most part, they're really welcomed. And, you know, that it may be the opposite. I don't know. I'm not at the school, but that's the kind of the energy I get when a new child starts.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions from our guest? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. I assume it was me that you were. Okay, perfect. I have a nursery and one in SK in a private system as well. And my question is just around I'm a working mom. Thank goodness for COVID, I'm at home now, but generally my husband and I are quite busy. And in terms of, I'm a huge believer of keeping the kids busy as well, and with a lot of extracurricular activities and having them to continuously engage. So I kind of wanted to understand from Sunnybrook, they do have the Aftercare program. And I just kind of wanted to see from other people's experience what that program felt like to them. Is it just a bit of a, obviously, ideally, I wouldn't want a place where it's more like a daycare, more looking for enticed program, extracurricular, if there is any. It looks like on the websites that it does provide lots of extracurricular, but is that sufficient enough to have them engaged throughout all 5 days of the week? And what does that feel like, and how long does that go on for, and are they engaged? It is a fairly smaller school, so are the extracurricular program wide range enough for the kids to be engaged all throughout 5 days of the week?
Is there a panelist that can talk to the aftercare or the clubs? We haven't talked about that.
Once again, 2 very different kids. And I found that the clubs offered a lot. There was everything from, I can't remember now, cooking to different sports, chess. There really is a huge selection. And every time, there's 2 terms of clubs. So when the club selection, and they'd hold the big assembly to announce the clubs, it was a lot of excitement. It was never either child looking at what the clubs offered and thinking, I don't know what I want to do. It was always like I had to narrow down their choices. So I think the selection was quite good. And it certainly, they were engaging, and it was so easy because they're at school. I can't really speak to Aftercare a lot because I'm a stay-at-home mom, but it does allow even kids who don't use it regularly to drop in, sort of. And I would say, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, because it's been a while since I've used it. But I would say a lot of the club is they've had such a structured school day. It's that release of playing. There's a lot of outdoor time. So I don't really see that for my kids needed to be structured. Because quite frankly, when I picked them up from school right after school, they weren't ready to do any work. They wanted to relax and go outside or whatever. So I saw that is very, if I recall, there's also a homework. Someone can correct me on that if I'm wrong, where kids can do homework in the library. Is that right? Still, do they still?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. So sorry. So that you're mostly, I'm assuming older children would do that. So that if they're staying after school, their homework can at least be done. So then by the time you get them and, have to do dinner, you're not dealing with homework as well. So I found it was, the clubs were great. And when my kids did stay in the aftercare program, which wasn't often, it was certainly almost what they'd be doing at home anyway, except they'd be doing it, there'd be no screens around. So which was nice.
All right, thank you, Lori. Hopefully that answers your question. Is there another question from any of the panelists?
I actually have several questions. Sorry.
Go ahead.
But I feel like if anybody wants to jump in before I'm happy to wait to the next. So just in terms the IB program in itself, at a young age, does that have like, I don't know if any of the parents experience that, do the kids tend to burn out? So I've heard in high school levels, I've had nieces kind of gone through IB program, and sometimes there's some kids burning out, and it's pretty intense, and I'm sure it's subject to each school and whatnot potentially, but at a young age, is that, have you seen any experienced any kids of your own feeling like, it's a little too much, or do they truly just really go with it and they just form themselves around the program? How does that IB program work out for your children?
Is there a panelist that would like to answer that question?
I can say if you want, or if there's somebody else.
Go ahead, Lori.
Okay, take over. I can actually speak to the IB right up to grade 12. So I would say that in the younger years, you wouldn't even, like that whole IB, the pressure, whatever, it doesn't exist in the younger years. For sure, like nothing. I mean, it feeds their curiosity. It's very inquiry based. I would say if anything, it's fantastic. I wouldn't have continued my kids in IB if I didn't think so, obviously. But in the upper years, there's a lot of pressure. I'm not going to lie. But in like up until I would say grade 8 or 9, there's nothing. And in the younger years, it's just all about inquiring, learning, and it helped both my children. But I would say my daughter, because now she's in second year at university, she. I always thought it was funny in the elementary years learning to write essays, because I didn't do that for certain. I mean, I didn't analyze novels the same way they do at Sunnybrook, for instance. And I always thought, oh, it's so cute that they're doing this now. However, once they carry on to the next school, even if they're not doing IB, it's unbelievable what that kind of base learning that you get at Sunnybrook does for their writing, does for their research. Like both my kids are amazing researchers. I credit that to Sunnybrook. And even my son who's only in grade 8, the amount of research and finding the right research and going through all that is unbelievable. I'm really impressed with that, and it certainly has helped my daughter in university. Absolutely. But no stress with academics at all.
I can add another perspective. For my older daughter, she's certainly not the type to ask for extra work. So I was a little bit, I don't want to say apprehensive about the culminating project in grade 6, but she did have a big project in grade 6. And because she was able to influence and choose the subject and what the project was on, she actually spent way more time than she needed to the point where we said, you don't have to do as much. But she was so engaged, and she, and it was a group project, and she more than contributed. And I was so impressed, because I think for me and my daughters, I think it was the opposite, where the IB actually helped facilitate the learning and made them want to learn, whereas, you know, maybe some sort of traditional learning might have been a little bit less interesting for them.
Great. Now, I know you have more questions, Audric, but I just want to ask if someone else wants to jump in with a question.
Absolutely.
Or someone else. If not, we'll go back to Audric.
Sorry, that's my son's name.
Oh, sorry. What is your name?
Oh, it's Marianne.
Oh, hi, Marianne. All right. I don't think anyone else has a question, so we're just watching our time. So we have time probably for maybe 2 more questions. So go ahead, Marianne.
Okay, I'm just going to have one more. So it might be a big question for Lori, as because she had more of an extensive experience from going from a smaller school to a bigger school. That's kind of a bit of one concern that I have is like my son is quite gentle kind of soul. So I think small programs are really fit for him now, but I'm just like, well, then essentially, because when you're younger, you're so much more moldable. I'm like, well, is a small transition from a small school to a bigger school, does that, you mentioned, Lori, a little bit about, touched on it, is that a huge shock value, right? Like, would you have maybe thought about I think you mentioned about your daughter needed a little bit more time in a smaller environment. Would that actually have been better if she had gone to a bigger school from the beginning, where she's a little bit moldable and be exposed to a bigger school, so you wouldn't create such a larger shock value? Like, what's your thought around that?
With my daughter, who sounds similar maybe to your son in no, I think she needed, I was worried with her. We were definitely looking for a small school.
Yeah.
Just kind of had, and there was a teacher on our block at the time who said, you know, a small school would be good, would be best for her. So we were going with that. And I feel that was, she's very quiet, and that was what brought her out of her shell. So for instance, I remember thinking, okay, so my daughter in grade, sorry, I was trying to think of something to give you an example of what I'm talking about. My daughter in grade 7, so at her new school, big school, it's always scary changing schools. We all know that. I think all the schools in grade 7, so I'm glad I waited to grade 7, because there's a huge influx of kids coming in. So there's a lot of new kids. They all don't know where they're going. And the schools know that. So they're very understanding, and they do different things to help them, you know, because half of the kids at least usually are new. So it wasn't, you know, it's scary. She spent 8 years in one place. It was time for a change, but she was ready. As much as I say I'd like you to extend, that was probably more for me. But she was ready. As a matter of fact, she told us in grade 6 that she wanted to look at a big all-girls school. It wasn't what we thought she'd want at all. It shocked us, but it was right for her at that time. And one of the things I really remember with her changing schools is that near the beginning, she did some, I don't remember the name of it, but like some sort of peer tutoring. So she was, you know, she struggled in math a bit. So she was hooked up with an older student, a grade 11 student, I believe it was, or grade 10. And they did, so the student would tutor her in math on lunches and whatnot. And so it gave, I mean, it was great for her. She had a role model there then, and she knew that child, you know, the older kid. But the older kid got some volunteer hours by doing that. And so it's a program that they had, and I think a lot of schools have, a lot of the bigger schools, for older grades. But there was an assembly, and the assembly was from grade 7 to grade 12, the kids in a huge school. And they were asked kids who had started in the peer tutoring program, if they wanted to speak at the assembly. And my daughter said yes. And I was like, it was maybe a month into school. And I thought, I never would have done that. Not a chance would I have done that. And I really thought it was because of Sunnybrook and the small school, because she was confident going up in assemblies and speaking. There's a lot of leadership roles coming, like in grade 6, especially. They run the assemblies. So for her speaking, I said to her, oh, are you excited? Are you nervous? And she looked at me and she was like, not really. And I thought, wow, like she's speaking to up to grade 12s in this brand new environment. So I think for her, the small school gave her the confidence to do that. My son is different. He would, different child, but for her, the small environment was what enabled her to speak in a big.
Great, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Thank you, Lori. All right, final question. Anyone have a final question before we wrap up? All right.
We could ask one more if
Sure.
there are no questions. So our children are learning piano and guitar at the moment with music teachers that we're kind of doing separately. And just on the question of co-curriculars, I guess, is that something that they could do through the school, or would they have to continue to do that separately from the school?
Anybody want to field that question?
I don't know the answer.
Well, my daughters chose not to play instruments, but my understanding is that the music teacher at Sunnybrook is a very accomplished professional piano recital person or whatever, and he does private lessons that would be select and I think can be done on campus. Maybe not during the pandemic. I don't know about guitar, but I think there were guitar clubs, but I don't know how bespoke the instruction is.
Thank you, Linda.
We still haven't seen him in concert. I've listened to some of his YouTube stuff, and he's an amazing music teacher. I love the theory he does and everything. But my daughters don't play piano, unfortunately.
All right.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so just want to remind everyone who has joined us that we do have an open house if you want more information about the actual curriculum and to actually see a virtual tour. That's coming up on October the 21st. And again, I'm happy to set up, a one-on-one Zoom session with anyone and answer any further questions, more specific questions about the school and the curriculum with you, of course. And I want to end by saying a huge thank you for our 3 panelists for taking time out of their day and coming to share their experience with you. So we greatly appreciate it. Thank you, Linda, Heather, and Lori for coming tonight. And I wish everyone a wonderful evening, and please reach out if you have any other questions. Thank you for joining us.